Most people know Rowan Atkinson as Mr. Bean, the rubber-faced comedian in the battered green Mini who couldn't parallel park, couldn't talk to women, couldn't get through a day without dismantling something by accident. That character has been watched over 5 billion times on YouTube, which means most people who know Rowan Atkinson's face have no idea who Rowan Atkinson actually is. The real Rowan Atkinson is one of the most knowledgeable, most serious car people alive, not in the celebrity who owns nice things way. In the completed 2 seasons of competitive Renault 5 GT Turbo racing, wrote technical columns for car magazines under his own name, was second fastest celebrity ever on the Top Gear test track way. The man who played a character too incompetent to operate a deck chair spent his private life building a collection that automotive historians would study if it belonged to a museum. This is not a list of his most expensive cars. This is a list of his most interesting ones. And the gap between those two things is the whole point. Number 10. The Mercedes-Benz 500e. Atkinson owned 4 of them, not 1. 4. He described the Nautic blue of his favorite example as something he'd never seen on another. The 500e remains one of the most fascinating automotive collaborations ever made. Mercedes wanted to fit a 5.0-liter V8 into the mid-size E-Class, but the standard assembly line couldn't accommodate the modified engine bay. Solution: send each car individually to Porsche's factory in Stuttgart, where Porsche technicians hand-fitted the V8 one car at a time. Each 500e took 18 days to produce and was walked by hand between the 2 factories. The result? 326 horsepower and a car that looked completely standard. 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds in 1991, and a saloon that passed invisible on any European street. Atkinson buying 4 wasn't excess. It was a man who found something correct and refused to let it go. Number 9. The 1939 BMW 328 Roadster. Fewer than 150 BMW 328 Roadsters exist. Worldwide, Atkinson owns one. Only 464 were built across all body styles between 1936 and 1940. The 328 was the most dominant sports racing car of its era, winning at Bucharest in 1937, twice at the Nürburgring in 1938, and outright at the Mille Miglia in 1940. It achieved this with 80 horsepower from a 2-liter inline-6 in a car weighing 830 kilograms. The engine's engineering, hemispherical combustion chambers, a cross-pushrod valvetrain operating 2 sets of valves from one camshaft, was so advanced that BMW engineers spent years afterward studying it to understand what they'd originally built. Atkinson's is the open Roadster configuration, making it the rarest variant of an already extraordinary car. He uses it. The car is not a display object. That detail alone tells you everything about who he is. Number 8. The Lancia Delta 8-Chef Integrale Evo 2. Atkinson didn't just own one. He owned a progression of them, starting with an 8-Chef Integrale 8-valve and trading up to the 16-valve before eventually acquiring the Evo 2, the most developed, most capable version of the car that won the World Rally Championship 6 consecutive times between 1987 and 1992. The specific example from his collection was imported from Japan in 2011 and finished in a rare Lord Blue color, a combination that elevated an already unusual car into something genuinely one-of-a-kind at auction. Atkinson wrote about his Integrale with an enthusiasm he almost never directed at any other vehicle in his collection. He said he could not imagine any car getting you from point to point faster in the real world. Not the McLaren. Not the Aston Martin. The Lancia. That observation from a man who had owned and driven all of them simultaneously is one of the most honest pieces of automotive writing by any car enthusiast in the last 30 years. Number 7. The Honda NSX. Against the rest of the collection, this one seems almost offensively ordinary. No extreme rarity, no racing history, just a Japanese mid-engine sports car. But the reason Atkinson bought it is the reason it's on this list. The NSX was developed with direct input from Ayrton Senna, who consulted on the suspension and handling dynamics. It was the first mass-produced car with an all-aluminum monocoque body, a structure Honda engineered specifically for this vehicle. It proved that mid-engine dynamics didn't require the unreliability and difficulty Ferrari had made people assume were unavoidable. Atkinson's choice of the NSX alongside a McLaren F1 and an Aston Martin Zagato is a statement. He wasn't collecting status. He was collecting thinking. That NSX represented a particular quality of engineering thought. That it came from Japan rather than Italy made no difference to someone who understood what the engineers had actually done. If you've made it this far, and you're starting to realize that Rowan Atkinson has been hiding in plain sight as one of the most genuinely knowledgeable car people on the planet. While the world laughed at Mr. Bean falling out of a Mini, subscribe, because that gap between what people are famous for and what they actually are is exactly the kind of thing worth paying attention to. And we are paying attention. Number 6. The Lancia Thema 8.32. In 1986, Lancia did something that should have been conceptually impossible. They convinced Ferrari to give them an engine, not an engine derived from Ferrari, or inspired by Ferrari. The actual 3.0-liter V8 from the Ferrari 308, detuned from 240 to 215 horsepower for daily use and fitted, badge, sound, and mechanical character intact into the engine bay of a four-door executive saloon. The result was badged with the words Lancia by Ferrari on the engine cover and offered to executives who wanted to arrive at the opera in something that sounded like a race car when they left the car park. Atkinson's 1989 example is thought to be one of around 20 Thema 8.32s ever registered in the United Kingdom. He spent close to $20,000 maintaining and improving it during his ownership, and he chose it, by his own account, partly because of the rarity and partly because it came with velour upholstery instead of the standard leather. A man who owned a McLaren F1 had a seating preference. That is a specific kind of sanity. Number 5. The Rolls-Royce Phantom drophead with a V16 engine. The standard Phantom drophead uses a 6.75-liter V12. Atkinson's does not. His was fitted with an experimental V16, the same configuration Rolls-Royce prototyped for the Phantom before abandoning it over fuel consumption and cost concerns. Rolls-Royce confirmed the car exists but declined to release power figures, which suggests the numbers were either embarrassing in their excess or the legal arrangements around an experimental powertrain made disclosure complicated. What is certain, no other member of the public owns a V16 Rolls-Royce Phantom. The car was purchased at the standard drophead price of approximately $500,000 and carries an engine configuration the manufacturer itself decided was too much for production. Atkinson drives it. Number 4. The 1964 Ford Falcon Sprint. Atkinson raced a powder blue Falcon Sprint at the 2014 Goodwood Revival and was involved in a collision that damaged it significantly. The car was repaired and sold through Silverstone auctions, where it achieved strong results due to its condition and the documented provenance of his involvement. The Falcon Sprint is historically significant as the direct ancestor of the Ford Mustang, a compact V8 powered American car that anticipated everything the pony car era would become. Atkinson drove his at speed at Goodwood, not in a demonstration, but in competitive historic racing. He crashed it, had it repaired. The incident appears in the car's documented history. That is exactly the right relationship to have with a car. Number 3. The Aston Martin V8 Vantage Zagato. This is where the collection stops being impressive and starts being extraordinary. Atkinson owned not one but two Aston Martin V8 Vantage Zagatos, a road car and a dedicated race car, making him arguably the most committed private owner of one of the rarest Aston Martins ever built. Only 52 Vantage Zagatos were produced between 1986 and 1990, with bodywork hand formed by Zagato craftsmen in Milan and the shortened, deseamed body design to reduce weight from the standard Vantage. Atkinson purchased chassis number 2001-3, the first right-hand drive production example, in 1998 when it had covered only 7,500 miles, and immediately sent it to Aston Martin Works for a full conversion to AMAC C2 class racing specification. The 5.3-liter V8 was rebuilt with Weber Alpha fuel injection and ceramic-coated exhaust headers, lifting output from 432 to 482 horsepower. Weight dropped from 1,600 to 1,485 kilograms. Racing brakes, perspex side windows, competition suspension. His car is the only Vantage Zagato ever prepared to this specification by Aston Martin Works. He raced it himself for over a decade before crashing it in 2001. He had it rebuilt. Then he sold it to someone who has driven it on road since. The car carries Atkinson's racing history in its chassis records the way a proper car should. Number 2. The Lancia Delta Integrale. The full arc. This deserves a separate entry from the Evo 2 because Atkinson's relationship with the Integrale is not a collector story. It is a driver story. He started with the 8-valve version, found it insufficient, traded to the 16-valve, found that closer, and eventually arrived at the Evo 2, declaring it in print the fastest real-world car he had driven. Not fastest in a straight line. Fastest at moving a person from one real place to another through actual roads and traffic. He made this claim while also owning a McLaren F1 capable of 240 miles per hour. He owned the fastest production car on Earth and said the Lancia was quicker in practice. Think about what understanding of driving performance is contained in that single observation. This is not a man who reads brochures. Number 1. The McLaren F1. Chassis number 61 of 64 road cars ever built. Purchased in 1997 for $640,000 when the car was already considered the most significant production vehicle of the century. Atkinson drove it for 18 years and put 40,000 miles on the odometer, a figure that makes McLaren historians visibly uncomfortable when they hear it, because most F1s were locked in climate-controlled rooms the moment their owners took delivery. He crashed it in 1999, rear-ending a Rover Metro. Had it repaired. Crashed it again in 2011 on a wet section of the A605 near Peterborough, spinning off the road and hitting a tree. The V12 engine was thrown 20 yards from the wreckage. He suffered a shoulder injury. The repair cost $910,000, the largest single car insurance payout in British history, 3 times the previous record, and more than the car had originally cost. McLaren's factory in Woking spent over a year rebuilding it. Atkinson returned to the driver's seat. He then drove it for another 4 years before selling it in 2015 for $8 million, a profit of roughly $7 million on a car he had crashed twice, repaired for more than its purchase price, and driven further than most owners would have in a lifetime. The car's history makes it more valuable, not less. The McLaren F1's defining characteristic is that it rewards people who treat it as a car. Atkinson is the only owner who fully understood that. What makes this collection remarkable is not the price. What makes it remarkable is the coherence. Every car told you something specific about how he thought about driving. The Mercedes for invisible daily performance. The BMW 328 for pre-war engineering genius. The Lancia twice because no other car did what the Lancia did in the real world. The Thema for the Ferrari engine in civilian clothes. The Zagato because racing something is the only genuine way to know it. The Nensex because quality of engineering has no nationality. The Phantom because sometimes excess needs a V16 to make its point. And the McLaren, driven hard, crashed twice, repaired at astronomical cost, sold for 11 times what he paid, because the fastest production car on Earth deserves to be driven like one. Mr. Bean couldn't park a Mini. Rowan Atkinson was, by any serious measure, one of the most qualified and most serious automotive thinkers of his generation. The world spent 30 years laughing at the character and missing the man entirely. If that makes you feel something, if you've ever had a genuine passion for something that the world decided to look past because of what it was packaged in, then subscribe. We find the real thing behind the image. Every single time.